This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And today's guests teach me things, specifically symbolism in music. It's one of those things that I always feel everyone else gets more than I do. So I was beyond happy to have Alexander Hacke, Danielle DePicciotto, and Raven Chacon guide me through their experiences creating work heavy in symbolism. And we go beyond music into visual arts as well. Hackedepicciotto have released a new album that's full of symbolic music, but the symbolism in Keepsakes is much more personal this time. Raven discusses his connection to John Cage, growing up listening to Navajo songs and heavy metal, and Alexander explains the 3 layers of symbolism. And all 3 guests tell me how far the symbolism can go, even extending to the intended audience. So give them all a follow on social media at Hackedepicciotto and at Raven CHCN on Instagram. Pick up the music from Mute Records or on Bandcamp. Check out hackedepicciotto.de for more info. Check out Raven's past work and stay up to date on new pieces at spiderwebsinthe.sky.com. Follow us at Performance ANX on X and Instagram. Our pieces are available at performanceanx.threadless.com. And support our coffee habit at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. And hopefully you learned something new with Alexander Hacke, Danielle DePicciotto, and Raven Chacon on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network. All right, so I want to thank you guys for hopping on with me. This is fantastic.
Having us.
So I think, Danielle, you're like my most frequent flyer. I think this is like your 4th appearance on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, Alexander, this is your 3rd, and this is first for Raven, so this is awesome. So I got the full gamut here.
We're really happy that, Raven, you have time. At least this way we can speak to you if we don't see each other.
Yeah, it worked out. Yeah. It's
and I appreciate you getting up so early to do this. I know you're on a completely different time zone than me, so I thank you very much for that.
It's not too bad. I'm actually in Florida right now.
Oh, okay. So, good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. All right. So I feel a little bit better about that too. I thought it was gonna be like 8:00 in the morning. I'm like, this poor guy.
Florida. What's Florida like at the moment?
It's too hot. Yeah, it's just it's a residency here. So my wife and I came down, and we were trying to fit it into our schedules, and this was the best week to do it. So it's nice. It's cool. It's right on the beach. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. And they gave me a studio, and gave me a keyboard and some things. So
I wanted to talk to you. I know Hackedepicciotto has new work that's been released, and I'd love having you guys on. But anybody who's listened to this know that I usually do a kind of a deep dive when I have a singular guest on or a band. And when I have a good rapport with people and I really enjoy talking to them, I love having them on multiple times. But there's no point in doing a deep dive a 2nd, 3rd, 4th time. So the way I'd like to start this out, we're going to be talking a lot about symbolism in art today, focusing mainly on music because that's what I mainly focus on in the podcast. But I do talk about all different types of art. But before we do that, I want to know more about Raven. We'll do a mini dive into Raven and how you got to where you are. Since I have the opportunity and I have really been enjoying your work, going back and checking it out. So I really want to know more about how you got into what you do. So let's start off this way. So you're Navajo, and I'm always curious in different cultures and in different countries, the musical experience growing up. What were you listening to? What were your parents listening to? What was going on as you were growing up that really got you into music?
Yeah. The first 10 years of my life, I grew up on the Navajo reservation where my grandparents still live, and aunts and uncles. My mom is from out there, and the music was still pretty limited. I mean, that was reaching out there. There was, of course, whatever was on the radio, and my grandpa, he'd sing Navajo music all the time, make up songs, sing old songs. And he's probably the first person I knew who I would consider a musician, outside of other people just singing, maybe ceremonially. But outside of that, I mean, I had a bunch of aunts and uncles. They're not actually not too much older than myself. And they would just listen to heavy metal all day.
Oh, wow.
You know, whatever. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, all this stuff. So that I didn't hear any classical music until we moved away to Albuquerque, to the city. You know, that was the kind of most, maybe fastest music I'd heard, you know, or complex music. Not saying that Navajo music isn't complex. It's definitely complex in its own way, but, you know, polyphonic things happening. I mean, that's all I really listened to. It's rock music. But later, what ended up happening is when the family moved to Albuquerque, to the city, I had the opportunity to take piano lessons. My parents had met a woman who was studying at the university also, and she said, "Want to give your kids piano lessons for free?" And my mom said, "You got to do this.
Yeah,
it's free. You know, it's we don't have to pay for it." So, so I did that. I studied for like 3 years, play the piano, and I don't know. I don't think I was very good at it, but what it did give me was the skills to read music and read notes and all of that. So I had an interest in that, and I had a better understanding of other instruments from being able to do that. So I was really interested in, of course, you know, the electric guitar, being that was the only music I was listening to, but also, you know, saxophone. I wanted to learn all these other instruments. And so I think at a really young age, I started researching what those were, you know, and, you know, I think a lot of young composers, especially, you know, living composers, they try to build a bass guitar when they're 14, you know, have a spring or something, so I do things like that. And so there were kind of two things happening. There was me becoming familiar with classical music, or at least the notation around it. And then there was like making noise with this 2x4 with a spring on it and doing those kinds of things. And so there was like a noise practice that I was developing as a young person. And then there was also believing that I had to, if I wanted to be a serious musician, I should go study this other angle, this, you know, classical music, this notation music, being a, you know, composer, capital C. And that was the trajectory I was on for a long time. I was pretty naive, you know, or maybe somebody told me that was what I was supposed to do. And I had other interests, you know, I didn't think music was something I should go into that was any kind of living. So I actually was studying film for a little bit. Oh, wow. All of this then, you know, at some point I ended up moving to Los Angeles and going to Cal Arts. So all of this was an environment where they said, you can do all this stuff at the same time, you know, the classical thing, the noise thing, making art, making videos. And so there was no turning back at that point. I mean, I found others who were doing this. And in New Mexico, yeah, there was a small scene of people, but there wasn't enough, I think, for me to find a community of my own to develop what I was doing. And so, yeah.
When you went to college, was that before or after your surf thrash band Los Subliminados?
Oh, that was maybe ongoing. That was maybe that was a very early thing. That was, you know, we used to go and put on concerts in the desert out on the west side of Albuquerque. And so we, awesome. You know, there were a few of us who were interested in experimental music, but, you know, we didn't really have the handles of, you know, what was going on. And a lot of, you know, these even touring bands weren't really coming through, or at least I wasn't aware of them. You know, It wasn't until later there was more venues for this kind of thing. And some of that in part due to myself leaving and then coming back and saying, hey, I should, you know, compared to LA, I can rent a warehouse here in Albuquerque and, you know, keep things going.
Right.
A new generation of people who were into this stuff. But when I was, you know, early 20s, late teens, there was none of that. I couldn't find those people. So I had to get out of town.
So, and you also ended up having a fairly early exposure to John Cage, I believe, right?
Yeah. So that was, that's a funny story because the piano teacher who was teaching us when we were kids, we'd never seen her do a gig. You know, we'd go to her house and we'd play. And it was already a couple of years in. She told my mom, she said, bring the kids. I'm doing a concert at the university. And so we got dressed up. We went and wait for the concert to start. She comes out on stage wearing a bathrobe, carrying these rubber duckies. It's a piano on stage. And she throws like the rubber duckies into the piano and slams the lid shut. slams the lid to the keys shut and does something else, sings. And then, we never really see her play. And I'm like, what's going on here? What is this? I thought it was a joke. I thought it was comedy. I didn't know what was going on.
Understandable.
Yeah. People were laughing, and then it was huge applause. And and I still never really saw her play till years later. And, but what happened was after the concert, there was this old man there, and she introduced us, said, "This is the composer of that piece. His name's John Cage." And I said, okay, I never thought anything of it, being like 10 years old or whatever, 11 years old. But years later, this name kept coming back. I'd see it, and the more I'd explore this kind of thing I was getting into, that name kept coming up. And I was like, I met this guy. I know this guy. He came to Albuquerque and did his music. And so I think something in there, I'm not going to say I'm a huge John Cage practitioner or anything like that, but I think the link being there, that I had met this person was being acknowledged for the work he had done, and his name kept coming up. It was of some kind of importance that I had some kind of maybe handle there to keep referring back to. And it made me go and research more of what he was doing and what he had done. And, he passed away only a year after that. That was in the, late 80s or something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Albuquerque. Yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PerformanceANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. Oh, man, that's incredible. So he had this maybe subliminal effect on you. And so then you go to college and you're studying. What really drew you into the more experimental side of composition?
Yeah, it was already making these experiments. Maybe there was even though these things don't really overlap, it's rare that even today that my noise practice overlaps with the chamber music things. I don't really go and run a bass clarinet through a distortion pedal, even though maybe I do in my private life. And the reason I don't is because I'm still exploring just how the hell the bass clarinet works. And, I'm definitely not the kind of composer that's going to run this through a max patch or anything like that.
Okay.
On the other end of that, I think running voice through a, noise rig or whatever, I don't know. I keep them very separate for reasons I'm not even sure why yet. I think it's more the exploration of the classical instruments, though, is one of those reasons. And so I think, though, they still informed each other. I think there was still through improvisation and through the noise side of things, it was shaping the kind of music that I wanted to hear and make. And so going back to the more kind of formal composition, I was becoming familiar with these 20th century composers and then finding the kinds of things I wanted to do inside of that. But at the same time, in those kinds of music programs, you're expected to learn the canon of Western classical music and also the music theory around those things.
Right. Yeah.
And I think those are good skills for me to have. I was completely unfamiliar with them, but, having a language there to talk to other people who today perform my music, I think I definitely see the importance of that.
All right. So let's get Alex and Danielle involved in this too. They've been kind enough to join us. So let's get them involved in the conversation a little bit. All three of you guys really embrace the experimental side of music, and it's wonderful, and it's really opened my eyes to a lot of new sounds and a lot of new things. When you create this music, I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm talking, I guess, maybe generally speaking. Do you find that you're creating art to symbolize something, or does the symbol show itself after you started creating something? Is there one way more often than the other, or is it you just never know? Alex and Danielle, let's get you involved on this. I know it's kind of a broad question.
That's a broad question. Symbolism is very dear to me, and is very dear to us, I would say. It's very apparent in our music, considering that a symbol is a transcendent language, a transcendent way to give meaning to things. You can talk, you can write a message, a meaning into lyrics. You can create a feeling with the music, but the symbol transcends all of that. So the combination of sound with meaning is a symbol in itself.
That answer actually makes a lot more sense than the way I phrased the question.
With me, it's a little different. I grew up with classical music. I learned classical music from the start. And basically, after I left home, I spent many, many years trying to get away from it, which is really, really difficult, because when you're trained classically, and I started learning piano when I was 5 or 6, and then violin when I was 10, and I had a teacher that was hitting me with a bow, to really, make me do whatever she wanted me
to emphasize her point.
Yeah. And it took me years to get away from everything sounding like Bach. It's like it was a nightmare. I just couldn't get away from it. It was really difficult. And in a way, it's kind of what I always try in general with when I do something, is to break the concepts that I was taught, to kind of find what's actually hidden within these concepts that are maybe being cemented closed. And I can't really start liking something until I've broken all the rules and regulations and kind of found that what for me is like the essence of something. And that essence within itself is a symbol, or it's a symbolic in a way. Okay. And I don't even necessarily know of what at the beginning, maybe, or at all. But for me, it's just an essence of something which expresses a lot. But I can only do that if I've broken certain rules and regulations that our life is covered with.
Right.
So that's what I always try to do when I'm writing music, or if I'm doing art, or if I'm writing or whatever, is like to disintegrate everything so that kind of I see a different layer of things.
Okay.
And that symbolic quite quickly.
So you can tell it's there. You're just maybe not exactly 100% sure of what it is yet.
Yeah, and I'm digging for it.
Right.
And I can only do Neubauten, for instance, they have the sentence, nichts ist, alles kann, or what is it?
Was ist, was nicht ist, ist möglich. Nur was nicht ist, ist möglich.
Exactly.
That means what is. What is not is possible, is potentially possible.
Ooh.
Only what is not is potentially possible.
Oh, I like that. I have to remember that, but probably in English.
That's a very bad literal translation. But with a symbol, also, in theory, a symbol has 3 layers. Who devised the symbol? Who is the symbol meant for? And what means are utilized?
Okay.
So that's in theory of symbolism, that's the 3 layers of symbol.
Okay.
And a traffic sign. Who devised the system, the street, the cops, and
well, not necessarily. The meaning of the symbol was devised before the traffic sign was devised.
No, but as the traffic sign, the stop sign.
Okay.
Right. So it was devised by the authority for the driver, for the people within traffic. And it utilizes a very stark red color that symbolizes. So that's the three layers of every symbol.
Okay. And I want to make a disclaimer with this. I'm very bad at symbolism, so I'm taking this opportunity as a learning experience to learn from the three of you. So thank you. I appreciate anything that you guys offer me is teaching me. So this is fantastic. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity. Raven, what about you? Is it often that you're creating things in order to symbolize something, or you're finding the symbol as you're creating?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing about music, right? Is it's one of the few art forms, maybe it's the main one, where it can just exist. It doesn't have to mean anything.
Right.
I mean, it's existed as long as people have existed, singing, making rhythms, and it doesn't necessarily need to mean anything. But I think, of course, for a lot of us, there's a dissatisfaction with that sometimes. I mean, we all love music, any kind of music, but to find the potential for it to do more, whether that's to carry a narrative, to tell a story, or to relay some kind of, representation of something else that is one might not see on the surface or hear on the surface of the music. And so, yeah, for me, I think that it's taken on different kinds of tactics to do that. There's different layers to that too. There's the performance of it. There's the theater behind when we get on stage, and what kinds of consonances or dissonances might be there, things that don't, you go on stage looking very unlike the music sounds, has meaning. I think about all of the optics around the classical genre too. When Danielle's saying to escape classical music, it gets me thinking of just what it means that, there's a conductor on stage, up on this podium, and, there's a bunch of people, like a congregation or something, linking this to the church. We start thinking of those associations. It starts, and then one has to start looking at themselves. It's like, what am I, as a composer, am I supposed to have this other power as well? Or, I feel bad sometimes telling somebody, you're playing that wrong. What is that? And so there's some symbolism in the roles too, that we carry just to practice the art form that we're engaged in. But for me, I think a lot of this, still dealing with music, there's been an opportunity for me to put symbolism inside of the scores that I make. So working a lot with graphic notation, having these scores or these actions or symbols represent multiple things inside of them. Not only musical gestures, but also maybe there is a narrative in there. Maybe there is other kinds of cultural meaning or other kinds of contradictions. I think for me, it's dealing a lot with these same kind of musical ideas: consonance, dissonance, counterpoint, and how these things, are about conflict ultimately, whether that's political conflict, whether it's other kinds of, social interactions that happen, and finding ways for music to describe that or represent that.
Is it harder to get that across when you're in a collaboration? Because all of you have done solo work and collaborative work. And if you've got something in mind that you want to express musically or in any other form of art, because you all do other forms of art as well, if you're involved in a collaboration, is it harder to stay true to the symbolism that you want to get out there? I'm not sure who wants to jump in. I'll just let anybody jump in who wants to do that one.
I can start. With us, for instance, it's really interesting because we come from different worlds, and in that way, we have different forms of symbolism. We have different ways of going about symbolism, but at the same time, we have very many similar emotional connections with symbolism. So in that way, it's really great, because I know that I'm never going to get something from Alex that I would do. and he would never get something from me that he would do.
Right.
But it's always something new. And in that way, because we have like this foundation of the same emotion for what we're looking, but we have different ways of going about it, and also different things that we find interesting within the realm, it's going to be something more than what I could do on my own, or it's something more than he could do on his own. And that always kind of gives us the feeling as if the music itself is part of the collaboration and has its own mind.
Absolutely.
which makes it really magical. And it's always like, every time we start something, I know it's going to be really difficult at times, but at the same time, I'm really curious at what the result will be, because I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is part of the point of collaboration.
Yeah, I would like to pick it up from there, because at one point it is the music taking over, the piece actually being in charge and dictating what it wants, and that's the moment where it really gets interesting, I find, where our egos and our shared or individual intentions or have to step aside, because the music itself dictates what it needs, and we just serve. And that's basically that's like almost like a spiritual thing, where we become the vessels for the spirit, the inspiration, and we just serve the outcome, the result, which is the piece.
Oh, that's fascinating. And Raven, you've done some pretty incredible collaborations yourself. Do you find the same thing happening with Danielle and Alex in your work?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, just to go back to what Alex was saying a little bit further back about this, these things that are not possible, creating room for other things, I think was what I gathered from that. And I think, when the more people you add to this, it starts creating these other layers and maybe filling those voids where things were not supposed to be possible. And whether that's something very obvious, like skill sets, like I don't have the skill set to do this other person doesn't have the things that I can offer. And somewhere in there, these things happen. But I think back to the topic of symbolism, where you have these different viewpoints or ideas of what the piece is, clashing or aligning in some way that creates even these other possibilities that neither collaborator saw until the piece was finished, perhaps, or through the process. So that seems to have happened a lot with some of the kind of big collaborations that I did, especially with the group I was a part of, Post Commodity, was where a lot of times we really weren't on the same page. I mean, we knew the piece we wanted to make, we knew roughly what it was about, but sometimes we had very different opinions and worldviews about what it is we were trying to accomplish. And I think that was a good thing. I think there was tension inside of that, but I think what it allowed was different readings of the same piece from that audience, that person who's receiving what it is we're making. So I think, again, back to what Alex was saying, is these kind of different parts, the government graphic designer who works for the cops and is one person. And then but that resulted from this need, this shared experience of accidents kept happening at that intersection.
Right.
And then it broadens out to a big audience again. And I think when you add multiple people inside of that center mediation of designing the thing, I think that's when you have all these other things happen that were unplanned. And so, it's very much like making solo music or making music in a band. I mean, you're going to have all these other kinds of dynamics that might fit the project better or not.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Well, let's talk about the new Hackedepicciotto album. There's a lot of symbolism with that. The entire concept is friendship, if I'm remembering correctly. There's a lot of symbolism just in the title, Keepsakes. When you were writing it, was it written as an album symbolizing friendship, or did that, like Danielle was saying, did you discover that as you were writing the songs?
No, in this case, it was meant to be. During the pandemic, we realized that for us, the most important thing, besides our art and each other, of course, is as our friends, and that nothing compares to them. And
nice.
Yeah, a lot of them have been passing, and we couldn't see a lot for a long time.
Yeah.
We just were in Canada and saw some again for the first time in 6 years. Usually we go over to North America every year. And so we were kind of like, we want to integrate that in our music, and we want to write an album of gratitude to kind of celebrate what friendship is and dictate each song to a specific friend, to kind of have them there with us, because thinking of them while composing a song was kind of like beaming them into our studio, even if they weren't there in person. So in that way, it was quite symbolic.
That's beautiful. And the album is a little different from the last few albums. And I think that it sounds like it, purposefully done that way. Songs like, and you did release a couple of the friends that you wrote songs for, like La Femme Sauvage, dedicated to Francois Cactus, Stereo Total.
A drum kick without the bass drum. 2 seminal bands. 3 languages, 4 books. 5 days a week at the newspaper. 24 portraits made of wool. 36 years in Berlin, 57 times around the sun. But what is a number? It won't quite.
And Love Stuff to Anita Lane. And I mean, honestly, though, my favorite is I love Mastodon and Song of Gratitude. Those two really, I love those. But the album seems a little more intimate than the last few albums you have. And I think that is symbolic of the subject matter. I think it was done amazingly well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, whereas before we were concerning ourselves with more generalized, more universal topics as the decline of Western civilization, the end of the world, and other jolly topics. This was, we were trying to evoke certain characters within our music, which is also difficult because we have to stay true to our own unique voice. And these friends that we were thinking of when we wrote the music, they have, of course, they're very unique and particular own styles. Many of them are musicians. All of them are musicians.
Except
our fathers.
Yeah. So the Song of Gratitude is dedicated to our fathers. And that song is kind of more our sound, actually, or mainly our sound, because our fathers weren't musicians. Right. So it was like kind of the easiest one to make or to write, because we could just do what we usually do.
Okay.
Yeah. Because with every other piece, we had to stay true to that particular character and also stay true to our particular voice. So to build something, a narrative, or to build an object, a sculpture, an oral sculpture out of these elements was quite the challenge.
So challenging. So you mentioned that. That's something I wanted to ask you about. In a lot of experimental art and music with a heavy symbolism that's written specifically to be symbolic of something, it tends to be longer pieces. And like, for example, Raven, your inhale, exhale piece, it's amazing. But each side is roughly 20 minutes long. easier to write something that's heavy in symbolism in a longer piece to let it develop? Is that why you don't see a whole lot of 3-minute pop songs symbolizing a whole lot? So, so Raven, let's start off with you.
Yeah, I think maybe you're asking, is it necessary, right? Is it a requirement of certain symbols to have a long duration?
That's probably a better way to put it. Yeah.
I mean, it gets me thinking about that. Ultimately, a lot of us are talking about time in what we do, and so if a piece is longer, it's hard to ignore that maybe is what is being spoken about, or at least a reference of the window of time and our place inside of that window. So if something is happening, I don't know, if you have a piece of music that lasts for 10 years, obviously that's about I think that's about something probably, right? And
hopefully,
but
10-year long.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, if it doesn't move much, if it's just, this piece for 10 years, or it's something, like John Cage's piece, Back to Cage, with the, I think that's in Germany, right? The organ that, as slow as possible or as long as possible.
I think they just changed keys, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The next key changes in 3 years.
So when I was in Berlin, last time I saw Danielle and Alex, there was a rest. So there was nothing playing for a couple of years. I think we were going to go see it, a bunch of us, and there was a quarter note rest or something happening at that point. But no, there's a good question there in that. What might a short piece of music talk about that is that can relay symbolism in such a small amount of time, in a short amount of time? I wrote this piece recently. I wrote 13 pieces, and they were for different friends, different colleagues. They're one-page graphic scores. They're kind of miniatures, I suppose. I wrote them for different Indigenous women. One of them is for our shared friend, Laura Ortman.
Nice.
But I wrote a piece for a composer named Barbara Crowell. And these pieces are kind of portraitures of how I see their work, their biography, their relationships to their communities, to other artists. And I wanted to write about what I know of my friend Barbara and her the way she's navigated an art career, but also dealing with more kind of health issues, but also speaking to larger survivance and endurance of Indigenous women. So this is a piece for playing 4 notes on the flute in succession and holding the tone as long as possible. Oh. So just blowing into the flute with one breath and letting that tone last as long as it can. And so the 4 times, one is just a normal breath. One is breathing through the flute while also singing. Another time is also while humming, and another time is while hissing. So all of these 13 scores, they're portraitures. They have a lot of symbolism in them, a lot of meaning, a lot of references to the people I'm writing them for, but they're all very short. I mean, especially that one. I mean, unless you're a phenomenal circular breather, this piece is over in about 3 minutes. But the other works, I mean, even though they're confined to one page of instructions and drawings, they might last. One of them, I think, could last for a year, depending how it's interpreted.
Wow.
But I think for me, I think there's also the variableness of that. I mean, having the agency for the performer to decide this is only a 1-minute piece or this is a year-long piece, the same piece. I think the agency alone is symbolic about, of something. So I think the duration itself holds a lot of meaning, has a lot of representation oftentimes. And I think those are the things I'm interested in trying to reconcile in my work right now.
Is the intended audience also a factor in determining the length of something that's symbolic?
I mean, that's another thing too. For the past 6 or 7 years, I've been writing a few pieces. I was actually, maybe the first one I've really started doing this with was a commission by the Kronos Quartet. And the piece is really just only for the people playing it. I only wrote it for the quartet that takes on this piece. course, they're going to want to do this in front of an audience. I mean, especially Kronos, do a gig, right?
Yeah.
But they commissioned a bunch of pieces, and I was thinking, I really want to write something just that's for the shared experience of the 4 people who are undertaking the learning of the piece. And anything else that escapes that is what the audience will hear. So there's symbolism in the notation that only you would know if you were looking at the score, which is shared. I mean, that was part of their commissioning project, was all the materials would be shared with the public or, emerging quartets who wanted to learn these pieces as a learning repertoire. But,
that's incredible.
I think in some of these pieces, the audience is kind of secondary. It's more just, myself and these musicians who are learning the score to have this dialogue.
Alex and Danielle, have you, my mind just went blank. Is the intended audience a factor in your writing at all?
Yeah, certainly. But I think really, well, in performing it, definitely.
But not in composing it.
No, not in composing it. It's
okay.
Well, I think creation of anything, be it art or creation in general, is not a time-related thing. For me, it is about now. Like creation happens now. It's not something that happened sometime in the past. I don't care about the Big Bang Theory. I think that the whole world is being constantly created anew in this very moment. Therefore, I think that the length of a piece is just a means to put emphasis on a development, on an evolution within the piece. There is this concept of liminality that's like in an initiation, you have the time before the change happens and the time after the thing happens.
Right.
And that is something that is generally something that happens in music. And I think very much in our music too, that we create a development to a certain point where there happens a change. And that time in between where the before is not apparent or not an influence anymore, and the after has not started yet. That's a very interesting point in creation, and I think in music. Our last album, the one before, we called The Silver Threshold, and that was this threshold idea that you stand in the doorway from between the time that is behind you and the time that is about to start.
Right.
That moment, and that is the magic moment where everything happens. And to emphasize that moment, I think it can happen in a very short time. You can do something very significant, and you can make a point, a statement that really makes clear what was before and what is the time after. You can do that in a very short piece.
Yeah.
But it certainly helps to put the listener and also yourself into a state of awareness to prepare for that change, for that development, I think.
I mean, basically, I think that what our music is about most of all is energy, is achieving a certain kind of energy. And it's like when, I can only describe it like, for instance, when you have 2 dissonant sounds and you feel like something vibrating between those sounds, or when we do a lot of singing lately where we're doing harmonies, because when you really hit those notes and you have that energy in between them, or also, for instance, I play violin. It's the instrument that's closest to the voice. And it's basically when it's really played really, really cleanly, it starts vibrating. The whole instrument starts vibrating, and it vibrates into your throat. And it's a pretty incredible effect. And so we kind of always try to achieve that in each song, to get some kind of vibration going that we can almost feel bodily. And that can happen within a second. And it can be enough. And we have some songs that are like two or 3 minutes, I think, and that achieve that. And then we have some songs where they need to build up to achieve a different kind of energy, maybe a heavier energy. Mm-hmm. And they're 20 minutes long. But that's kind of what we're always working at to get that vibration, that resonance where you feel like, your teeth are grinding or something.
Is the visual aspect of your compositions, does that happen usually at the same time that you're composing pieces? I'm thinking like American Legend #1. I was just watching that this morning. Things like that. Is that all done at the same time, or do you concentrate on the audio aspect and then the visual aspect, vice versa, or all at once?
So you're talking about the performance of it, I guess.
Correct.
The
yes.
staging of it. Yeah. No, I think that was part of the composition, and that was, sometimes there's pieces like that too, where I'm not looking for an instrument because I like the sound or I even want the sound. So I'm thinking more of what it looks like when I'm performing on that instrument. So in that piece, there's an instrument that's the chopping of wood, and I don't really think that is all that good of a sound. It sounds like chopping wood, and there's not. I mean, this is not putting contact mics or anything on it. It's just chopping wood. It's a percussive act, but there's a lot of meaning inside of that single act, right? I mean, what it's referencing in the score, which is talking about American history, is it talking about tearing down a house or building a house, when you're chopping wood?
Right. Okay.
Is it talking about building a fire? And what's that fire for? Is it for warmth, or is it to burn down the house too, So all of that, it happens in that one chopping, one action. And so I've been putting more things like that into these scores. I guess there's still a note for that hit, for that percussive act, but it's as much theater as it is a sonic gesture.
Right.
I have a question. Raven, I saw your exhibition in the Haus der Kulturen der Welt. You showed, it was like a drawn notation. And it really kind of, I didn't really understand it, but I thought I really stood in front of it for a long time. There was no real explanation within the exhibition. And so I was wondering if you could speak about that, because there was no sound to it, right?
There was, I didn't get to make it over for that. That was another COVID thing, where exhibitions were happening and artists didn't get to go, and Zoom is inadequate for anything. It's unfortunate. I thought they were going to have a label for that. It's unfortunate they didn't, but there was an audio component. There were supposed to be 8 channels playing. Whether they did that or not, I will never know. But what it is when I was at Standing Rock in 2016, I was making field recordings while I was there. And one of the things going back, it was actually a lot of the work I was doing when I was over in Berlin, was going through those recordings. Like I was there for about 10 days listening to what I had captured on my portable field recorder. And something that kept coming up was drones, surveillance drones that were flying around, both from the state police and the private security, but also from water protectors, had their own counter drones.
Oh, wow.
And the funny thing about these motors on these drones, when they would spin at full speed, it would be A440.
Wow.
Was what the pitch of the drones are when they fly. So at the exhibition there that Danielle saw, it was supposed to be 8 channels of different drones flying around.
Oh, wow.
And there was a score made. The piece is called Storm Pattern. And what that's referencing is a style of Navajo weaving where there's a pattern in the middle and it emerges in all the different directions outward. And so what is shown on that is the different flight paths of the audio channels replicating these drones flying around. It's a bummer they didn't provide more explanation.
Is that the drawing? Was that the drawing?
Well, the drawing, yeah. So the drawing is actually a transcription of what you're hearing in the space.
Okay. Because it looked beautiful. I mean, and I was just thinking about this whole symbolic theme, It was like, I was like, wow, it looks like a hidden map to some incredible sound. I thought it was I thought it was interesting to show that and not hear it, because it really kind of made my mind go, what is it? What is it? And I mean, maybe the whole thing was it was like a group show. So there were a lot of things hanging, and maybe they were just playing all of the sounds after another or something. I don't know, but I know that
who knows? Who knows what we're doing over there?
Yeah. But it was really beautiful as a visual, symbolic kind of map, and I thought it was really interesting. I was wondering if you do that in general.
In a way, I mean, I haven't looked at that score in a while, but just off the top of my head, there is some ambiguous symbols in that transcription. One of them would be a symbol for a trill, which is basically like a wavy line, on the piano. But this is this kind of vibration that's happening when you hear these drones going, but also it's referencing the river, the water that's being protected at Standing Rock. So there's these kind of dual symbols that both look like musical symbols that are describing what's happening when you hear the piece, but they're also replicating the landscape of the place that's being spoken about. Wow. So this kind of thing is something I've been working with for a while with compositions, and using the actual standard music notation, the graphics of these things that are kind of set, they're kind of a formal, they're now like TNG files, or they're like little, like they're standardized now in Finale and Sibelius and these music programs that to me become representative of other things. They look like landscapes, they look like the sun, they look like rivers and mountains.
Yeah, that's exactly what I felt, and I loved it, I have to say. I really do. And it reminded me a little bit of shape note singing too. I don't know if you...
Oh yeah.
Sacred harp
singing and stuff, it was like...
Yeah.
Funny thing also is that we, when we coined the term cinematic drone for our music, and you would Google that term cinematic drone, you would come up with drones, only little for cameras, So that's basically, you had a cinematic drone going on there.
Yeah. Well, that is so cool. I have to check that out, because, and that's one of the things that drew me into your art, Raven, and is and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, the Ella Yora piece that you put out a few years ago.
Ayayora,
yeah. Ayayora. That fascinated me. That was so incredible. And that was a found cassette that you transcribed for
voice.
Yeah. Oh, voice. That's what it was. I listened to that, and I was blown away. That was just incredible.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That was a tape I found on the ground, and it was a kind of like a court deposition or something, or police interview. And it was it was actually a little bit disturbing, but the crying that was happening by the person telling the stories in it was very musical in an odd way, and I just set myself to transcribing the crying only.
That's amazing.
And gave that back to an opera singer to sing. That's a really early piece. I mean, that one was about 20 years ago that piece happened.
Oh wow, it's incredible. I listened to that, and I was just transfixed on it. It really touched me. That was just incredible. So
thanks.
I know you guys all have things to do, and it's been wonderful talking with you. And I've learned a lot. I can't wait to actually go back and edit this one, because you guys gave me so much information. I'm going to need to listen to this a second time to kind of absorb it all. But I want to find out, Alex and Danielle, your new album, Keepsakes, is out. Where can people find it? How can they follow you? Are you going to be supporting it with tour dates? What are the socials and purchase options?
Okay, what you have to do is you go to your local record store, because our albums now are on Mute Record, and Mute Records are being distributed internationally. So the best thing you can possibly do is go to your local record store. If they don't have it, ask them to order it. And that's best for them, for you, and for us. Else, you can go to our Bandcamp page, which is www.bandcamp.com/Hackedepicciotto. That's where you can order all kinds of hard copies and also digital. Sorry, I have a duck in my pocket.
And we will also be touring.
I'm going to isolate that.
We're going to be touring through Europe all fall, and we're hoping to be able to maybe go to the U.S. next spring. We haven't played in the U.S. for 6 years, I think, and we're hoping that it might work out next year.
I know. I'm hoping to come and see a show.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ever since Howard introduced us, I haven't been able to see you guys.
Yeah. We hope it'll work out next year.
So, all right, Raven, what are you working on? You're in Florida working on pieces right now. What is coming up for you, and how can people find your art and follow you and help support you?
Yeah, let's see. I've got I'm working on a new piece that's going to premiere at the Perlman Art Center, which is a performing arts space they're building at Ground Zero, the World Trade Center.
Wow.
So I'm writing a piece for the premiere of that arts center for 8 voices and hyperdirectional speakers. That's going to premiere in September. But also anything to plug. The book of scores I was talking about, it's called Forzi Kalasha. I put that out last year, so one can order that a few different places, Art Metropole or New Documents. There's a place in Europe, Soundhome, that has them as well. So, that's a book of scores.
Is there a website to check out or a social media that people can follow your work?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, just under my name, Raven Chacon. There's also a website, Spiderwebs in the Sky. It's all my projects on there.
I'm on it right now.
There's band camps and things as well.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for spending time with me, for teaching me a lot, because like I said, I'm really bad at this kind of stuff. So I really, really want to learn more about it. And I really do appreciate learning it from just incredible artists such as yourself. So thank you so much, Alex and Daniel. I look forward to having you guys on again. Raven, I would love to do another episode with you. Maybe we do a heavy metal episode or something.
Sure.